there's so much going on in the White House. I'll let you take it. Tell me what's going on. You've got inside scoop on everything. We're going to hear from those guys later about the perspective on China. This China thing's a massive deal. President Trump has already put out, I think, the White House has already put out that they're going to have she and Trump are going to have a follow-on phone call, I think, in the next couple of weeks. The White House.
Sure. I want to walk through what you guys are talking about with USAID, because I think that has sort of become the railhead, much like the FBI purge, of really deconstructing the administrative.
Name, place name, backstory stuff.
Is the special.
I'm so pretty. I like you, but I'm angry with you for some reason.
Tower at the end of the universe. Put the piece of resistance onto the Craggle.
Railhead,
and
much
disarm
like
it
the
forever.
FBI purge, of really deconstructing the administrative state, which we're seeing.
This is the deep state. This is far the administrative state.
Yeah, and it's not just happening in like 1.5 times speed. It's happening in like 3 times speed, and it's glorious to see, especially from the White House lawn. But to that point, a few days before President Trump was sworn in, Norm Eisen, the whole sort of lawfare brigade, they put out the 3rd edition of what's called the Democracy Playbook, which comes from the Brookings Institution. And if you sort of go back to the core thesis of this show, I think really it emanated from Darren Beattie. Congratulations to Darren.
Undersecretary Darren Beattie.
Yes, sorry. It's the first time. That was sort of the theory of the case, that all of the tactics that they had used for color revolutions abroad, they were sort of turning the guns inward circular and now using it to bring about this idea that we have, quote, democratic backsliding, and therefore we need to get rid of President Trump because he's an autocrat, right? So they put out this new edition, this 3rd edition, and proving our point, it is now entirely focused on how to push back against President Trump and domestic political forces. But I want to get even more granular here, because if you look at the verticals through which they have tried to push back against President Trump, and we were remarking on this yesterday, it's Jamie Raskin groveling on the steps of USAID, right? They don't have any levers of power.
Sad.
Yeah, it's lame. It's pathetic. But here's the thing. Democracy Forward, which was sort of the apparatus, the compendium of all of these resistance groups, 120 plus organizations, the one outfit that they set up prior to President Trump being sworn in was something called Civil Service Strong. And it was the idea that they were going to provide legal aid and resources to whistleblowers, sort of, I think, a shadow impeachment, right? They can't impeach President Trump right now, but they're laying the groundwork, or they're trying to sort of do it indirectly.
They want to build the case and have the resistance off that.
And USAID was the linchpin on all of that. Why do I say that?
Wow.
Because it's mentioned dozens of times in the Democracy Playbook, so much so that I want to read you a quote from it, talking about how USAID is essentially the linchpin in funding what they say civil society, the media, which is the only way they can push back. An important component of deterrence by denial is a robust and empowered independent media able to investigate, watchdog, and hold violators to account. Therefore, part of the deterrence strategy should include increased governmental resources and an expansion of programs and agencies to support a sustained and top-level commitment to support free media. This should include supporting independent investigative consortiums such as the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, which has been funded in part by the U.S. Agency for International Development, the State Department, and private foundations. And to that point, the co-author of this report, well, he also happens to be was formerly the co-chair of the Political, Economic, Trade, and Development Working Groups for the EU, Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus, Armenia, Poland, and Romania. So you see how this all runs together. And most importantly, Steve, what they talk about in terms of political opposition groups, which is their second priority, and all of this, the first one being securing elections. I think we know that's a little bit of projection. They talk about wanting to foster alliances internationally, from form networks between other opposition groups, electoral activists, civil society groups, and where appropriate, international organizations and actors. So what did we say when we sat here on election night? They will outsource their opposition internationally because they have no foothold here, and we have gutted their censorship industrial complex. And the fact that we are now removing these people forcibly from these buildings where that was how they were going to have their resistance, by leaking and being whistleblowers, we have deprived them of that ability, and that is why they're melting down.
Go back to this. Very important what Elon's team is doing, cutting off the emails, cutting out the access. Go back to physically making sure the buildings are hermetically sealed. Because these guys have been working from home, but they want access to all that. To cut them off gives them their power to leak and to get to the Washington Post.
You can't whistleblow if you don't have the whistle, right? And to that point, you're already seeing every night on MSNBC, you have another so-called whistleblower, a former, now fired government employee, whether it was the inspector generals, whether it was the FBI people, the DOJ people, all going on there. Now, make no mistake, those people wanted to make their MSNBC primetime debut, but they wanted to be doing it where the Chiron would still they'd still have that title, and they'd be actively leaking against President Trump. But they now no longer have that ability. And like I said, I think this democracy playbook, right, the idea of Norm Eisen in concert with Mark Zaid, who was the lawyer for the first impeachment inquiry, it's all the same people who want to be impeaching President Trump right now, but they can't because they don't have the power. And now they're being stripped of any ability to sort of carry out what I guess they accuse us of having a shadow government, a shadow impeachment. And in reality, that's what they've been trying to do. Unbelievable.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has just put forward, she's going to come forward with legislation to take it down. This whole roll-up under Rubio, right now, from the White House perspective, they're shutting this thing down, right? They're going to zero this out to never let this happen again, correct?
They're subsuming it, as they should, and I think that they're doing it through.
You think it's the easiest way to subsume it under state and then wind it down?
I mean, look, just like CISA, USAID, I would completely get rid of it, salt the earth around it while we're at it. But I think it's just important, the paradigm through which we get rid of it. We're not getting rid of it because we think foreign aid is a waste and it's, we're supporting the musicals in Nigeria for transgenders. That's cool. We can stop that too. But we're talking about funding bioweapons programs in hostile foreign countries. That's the crux of it, right? That's what we want to get to the deep, dark underbelly of. We want to audit the Ukraine aid, the 77 million, the outstanding 170 billion.
I only saw 77 billion. You got to admire his chutzpah, right? He knows the audit's coming, and he says, "I only got 77 billion. What are you guys whining about?"
I don't think we're going to take the performative activism from Zelensky.
By the way, the Justice Department, a massive criminal investigation about this entire network, both the domestic and funding. You just heard the Darien Gap part. This has to be line item out. We need to know where every penny went.
The group that MSNBC is highlighting just 2 nights ago, advising illegal aliens on how to avoid ICE agents and telling them to lie to them. They've received over $16 million in government grants. Okay. It's a hotbed of corruption and destruction of this country.
And malfeasance.
And it's intentional. It's not an accident. And that's what the USAID paradigm shift is about. This is intentional. It's not incompetence. It's not just waste, fraud, and abuse. It's the intentional destruction of this country.
Natalie, our White House correspondent, is with us this morning. We're going to take a short commercial break. You've done so much work on the Chinese Communist Party. I know the White House is getting a response, and they're already putting out that President Trump's going to talk to it. But there's a big difference in doing Mexico and doing and putting tariffs on Mexico, putting tariffs on Canada, using a national emergency proclamation, which they had to do at this time, then going after the CCP. What sense, since you've got you got Waltz as a hawk, Rubio's a hawk, Navarro's a hawk, Besson's kind of a hawk, about as big a hawk as you can get on Wall Street. What's your sense of how this is going to play out, since you've done so much about the infiltration of the CCP here in the United States, particularly the business community's lighting up the phones over the White House saying, President Trump, you got to go easy on Xi. What's your thinking so far?
Well, I feel like for so long the term China hawk was sort of used as like a limited hangout or cover for kind of more establishment Republicans who knew it was a less controversial issue that they could sort of galvanize the base around because everyone hates the Chinese Communist Party, but they never actually did anything. And as someone who has covered this beat for years now, Chinese Communist Party infiltration emanating out of the United Front Work Department, a multi-billion-dollar political warfare operation designed to destroy this country through infiltration as opposed to invasion. I've never seen anything like this in terms of actually taking on the Chinese Communist Party in a substantive way. Now, how does it play out? We're sort of in uncharted territory and uncharted waters because I think the fact that I'm sitting here, the fact that I made it to become your co-host is a testament to how much Chinese Communist Party infiltration there was for me to expose. And I'm not just talking members of Congress, people, career servants, all that stuff. I'm talking all the way down to, congressional staffers, irrelevant people. So you want to talk about the big pharma campaign that's being mounted against RFK? Nothing. It pales in comparison to the China stuff.
The lords of easy money, Larry Fink and that crowd on Wall Street. You've got the entire Silicon Valley crowd, all the corporatists, Hollywood. This is everybody. They're blowing up Trump's phone, and every lobbyist is calling him, what are you doing? You can't do this. It's going to tank the market.
But this is economic warfare that President Trump is waging on behalf of the American people, as opposed to, frankly, A, managed decline, but B, economic warfare being waged against the American people. And it's a paradigm shift, and I don't think people understand how truly momentous it is to talking about 25% tariffs against the Chinese Communist Party, who just a few weeks ago had someone in the White House that they could get anything they wanted out of.
It's incredible, and of course, China's pushing back. This is going to be a throwdown, President Trump. And look, President Trump has to balance a lot of things. Here we're proud to be leaders of the anti-CCP movement. He's got to balance a lot of stuff, and he's the economy, the whole corporate environment. But this is the beginning of how we can start to expose it and unwind it.
He has a lot, but I also think he has an extremely wonderful team, and I think that is the juxtaposition. Every person who is in leadership in every department or every agency, they are empowered actors, and they're, for lack of a better word, not to be reductive, they're really based, and they're really operating on all cylinders, and it's amazing to see.
Last question: as we scale this up, because Elon's doing the line diagrams, he's finding out kind of in his mind how this thing works. You've had USAID, but you've got the feckless House has talked about $300 billion over 10 years. That's a non-starter. I've talked to guys
in a strongly worded letter.
Worded letter, and also with the deportations. Those things are the deportations. The three things you got to work on: end the kinetic wars. You've heard Zelensky saying, "Hey, I only got $77 billion. That thing's a joke." Bibi's here today for the Middle East war. The two things: ramping up actually on the ice side, on scale, and also having a realistic conversation. Where do you think the White House is going in this? Give me a minute on that.
Well, I think Congress is sort of just drifting off of what the White House is doing. I mean, they had a chance to actually stand in the breach. And I think that's sort of the paradigm to view it through, is that the White House is actively creating these news cycles through shows of force and confidence, right? They have the nerve to take on the FBI, to subsume USAID, probably the most entrenched representation of the ossified deep state that exists in the entirety of this town. It's not like they just said, hey, we think we're going to review your funding. They said, no, you're done. Go home, right? I mean, that is paradigm shifting, frankly, paradigm ending. And, I'm so glad Congress now wants to hold their stupid little hearings. That's besides the point. Our audience is the one filling the gap in terms of getting these confirmations through, and it's the White House that is ahead on all things messaging.
Tim Pool tonight, what time?
Tim Pool tonight at, I believe, 8 p.m. Eastern. I will be there. If I make it back,
and
I'll be back at the White House.
Stop. We always send security with her. Make sure she comes back from Spawn Ranch.
I think we might need extra security this time.
This is the last broadcast I'm going to do from West Virginia. It seems to me he's sending a message that he's not going to be in West Virginia long.
I love West Virginia. We should move.
Maybe take the compound over. Maybe not. Social media.
I'd like to see you in the skate park.
Yeah, no. Social media. You're not supposed to bust my chops here. Social media.
Is that why I have my job? Natalie G. Winters on all social media platforms. I've been told I'm controversial. So.
Controversial. You're the lead story in the South China Morning Post this morning.
I chuckled at that.
My favorite paper. You knew I was going to see that. I said when Natalie's leading the South China Morning Post. And listen, you're throwing down hard. There's no backup with these people. No backing down with these people. You continue to throw down hard. You're Natalie Winters, University of Chicago. Worked with us since an intern, 18.
Great. I think I got it. But just in case, tell me the whole thing again. I wasn't listening.